so anybody can watch them in the future. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. Welcome to this month's webinar, Brand Building for Profit. This is part of the Intentional Success series that I've been doing for the past several years. I'm excited, really, more so than normal, about what we're going to talk about today. While brand is probably not anybody's favorite subject, and it's probably not even mine, I think I've got some good content I'm very excited to share with you today. So I just want to remind you, in this format on the Zoom interface, if you're not familiar with it, you can post questions at any time in the dialog box. I'm flying solo today. I don't have my assistant, but the box is open in front of me. If I see a question, if I can fit it in at that time, I absolutely will, so don't hesitate to ask. For all the people who are not here, who are going to email me afterwards and ask if the session was recorded, it is indeed recorded, and it's shared on av-matters.com and trstimson.com. Those go up very quickly. They'll probably be up this evening, and the handout will be available on the AV Matters website as well. So please feel free to share this with folks. This is part of the AV Matters program, and we'd like to thank AV Matters sponsors for making this possible, because this is not only a labor of love and time, there's a labor of money behind this as well. So the nice folks at Nationwide Wholesale Video have been very, very helpful to us over the years. AV Stummfel USA, Flex Rental Solutions, DWP Rents, Digital Projection, and the folks at Complete Crewing in Chicago. I also want to get a plug in there for Stimson Group, TR Stimson, and on the website, I think we have Closing the Deal Without Negotiating Price, one of my video series. Stop by the store, take a look at that, see if it works for you. All right. Oh, yeah. So we're doing webinars a little bit different this year. I've mapped out the entire webinar season. When you registered for this, you get all of them. Hopefully you've populated that on your calendar, but you will get those email reminders to tell you to set aside time for these webinars. And here you can see the subjects on the screen. It's kind of seasonal. As we get towards the end of the year, we start talking about business planning and how we're going to look at 2018. And at the end of the year, we can look back and talk about numbers and talk about metrics and how your business works. So I think throughout the year, I think there's the right information at the right time, and I hope you join me for all of these. For those who don't know, I am, of course, Tom Stimson, president of Stimson Group. You can find me all over the place, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever. Feel free to visit my website and subscribe to my Intentional Success newsletter. Now let's get on to the good stuff. Now, here's what we're going to learn today. I'm going to talk about brand imperatives. Imperatives are needs. There are things that your brand needs, and there are things that you need to do for your brand and about your brand. There's things that your brand has to do for you. We're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about brand multipliers, because there's no value in having a brand if you can't leverage it. So we're going to talk about leveraging brand. We're going to talk about missteps. There's some mistakes that a lot of us make. I've made some huge branding mistakes in my lifetime, and I might remember to tell you about them when I get to that section. And then the question that all of us have is, well, Tom, what is my brand? How can we uncover the brand in your organization or your personal brand so that you can leverage it? All right, that'll be an important piece of all this. And stay to the end. I've got a great conclusion for you. I've got some homework for you as well, because there's one thing to sit here and listen about brand, here are some fresh ideas about it, but there's another thing to apply them. And I have the homework for you so that you can get together and apply. I know a lot of you watch this in teams, and this would be great teamwork for the rest of this afternoon for you. All right, brand imperatives. The necessities of effective branding. I want to start with a little chart, a little 2x2 chart here. And the conversations that well, you guys hear me talk about this all the time. While I don't talk about brand a lot, we know that there are weak brands and strong brands. And I'm trying to fill in the gaps for you today on that. but I do talk about the difference between product focused and customer focused. Now, I call this a lot of different things. I approach this from different angles. I talk about the difference between how and what, selling the how versus selling the what, selling the end result versus selling the plan. These are the difference between product focused and customer focused. And this is very important when we're talking about branding and we're talking about how you grow your business. If you want to leverage your brand, where you focus your energy in terms of customers or products are going to make a difference. Let me show you where most of you are. I find that most of the folks that I encounter and I get to talk with, more than 50%, that would be most, are proposal mills. You know, you measure your success by how many RFPs you respond to. If your brand is less than strong, perhaps a little bit weak, and if you tend to be product focused, which for most of my viewers, many of you are AV industry people, we're product people, we're gearheads. Okay? We know more about specs than we do about our customers. So we tend to be product focused, and whether you're rental or integration, you tend to sell from the position of understanding products and presenting what products can do. If we have a weak brand and all we do is talk about product, we tend to be a proposal mill. That's the only way we're going to get business. You're fairly undifferentiated. However, if we can start shifting some of that energy, as I've been imploring you to do for the past, well, more than 10 years, if we start shifting our energy to being more customer focused and talking about things in customer terms, looking at what we do from the customer's point of view, but our brand is still weak, what we generate are indifferent customers. And indifferent customers look like, you know, you win a job, you win an opportunity, you go out there and you do great work, and the customer still puts it out to bid next time. Okay, that's a sign of a weak brand, and we'll talk more about this at the very end of the webinar. Now, if you have a stronger brand and you've done a good job of establishing yourself in the marketplace, and you stand for something, but you're still things that products are what your products and services are what's important about you, you're going to win some business. You're probably going to make some customers pretty happy, but they're always going to expect better because there's something missing from that. And what they're missing is the customer experience. They're missing the satisfaction and confidence that you truly get them. And it'll manifest itself in a lot of ways, but most commonly, it's going to be a rejection of your sales team. It's like, hey, I like working with you guys. Your field guys are great. You know, I feel safe hiring you, but whatever comes after but is the customer expecting better. If we can get the magic formula of the right amount of customer focus and the right amount of brand, then what we're going to get is a situation where the customer wants more. They're going to say things like, wow, that was great. What else do you guys do? Okay, that's where we want to be. That's what we're looking for. That's what we believe we have in our best customers. And everybody on this call has a loyal customer. They wouldn't think of doing business with anyone else. And if they did, they would let you know. Okay? Look at their experience and discover likely that not only is your brand working in your favor, it's your focus on them as a customer versus the things that you do that's allowing them or encouraging them to stay with you. So think about this. Keep this in mind as we move through this discussion of brand, and I'll come back to it later on. Oh, and I want to point out one more thing. If you have the luxury of having a strong brand and being customer focused, there are degrees to this. In other words, there's always room for improvement. And the more we move up into that upper right-hand corner, the more indifferent the client is to the margin that you make. If you want to find a customer, if I'm looking for a customer who really cares about how much money I'm making as a supplier, if that's their focus, I guarantee you that I'm in the bottom left-hand corner of that proposal mill quadrant. If you want customers to be indifferent and only care about the outcome, and they're willing to spend whatever it takes to get what they want, and you can deliver them what they want, That's the sweet spot. That's where the high margins are. That's where the customer loyalty is. This is not about gouging customers. This is not overcharging. This is simply getting what it's worth. And what it is worth is defined in customer terms, not in product terms. So some brand imperatives. If you're going to be an effective branding organization, you're going to have to learn that creativity will always trump functionality. Okay? This has a lot to do with focusing on customers versus focusing on products. It's very hard to creatively focus on products, but you can creatively focus on customers. The challenge for you, my challenge to you, is that if you take the customer point of view over product emphasis, then what you're going to focus on is the usage, not how something works. The conversation we want to have with customers and prospects is how they will use you. This is how my best customers use us. Our best customers see us as this and allow us to do these things for them. It's not the how, it's always the what. Okay, so your creativity is more important than how well you do something. And I know that's counterintuitive to most of us because we're gearheads, a lot of left brain people on this phone call right now. We're talking about branding. We're not talking about whether this widget is the right widget for the application. The other thing about brand that we have to understand is that it helps customers see what you could be. Customers buy aspirational performance. They look at you and say, here's what it could be. I'm willing to make that risk. I'm willing to make the investment in something. The promise is more important than the journey. Now, a lot of us, and certainly I think it's an improvement in the conversation that we're talking about customer experience, and that more people are focused on customer experience and what it's like to do business with you, and being more creative about our user interface with the customer. That's great. Okay, that's going to improve the journey, but branding takes us ahead of the journey. Okay, so that's something I want you to think about. One of the things your brand has to do is promise something aspirational. Here's what it could be. Now, I got to pause right here because I said most of us are pretty left-brained about this. An aspirational promise doesn't always line up with the delivery. So as many of you know, I had some remodeling done at the house last year, so I'm talking about, aspirational. When I hired a contractor, I hired the aspirational image. The contractor didn't live up to the aspiration. The journey was a little bit rocky, but the end result didn't match the brand. So when the end result and the aspirations don't align, the journey is what you remember. When the end result and the aspirations do align, we can forget about the bumps in the journey because the journey is part of the process to getting to the aspirational result. All right, I got a question here about branding. It says, are you also talking, does that include the credibility of AV company to deliver value to client for that market segment? We're going to talk about credibility, and credibility is an element of the branding process, but it's not everything. So in the example I just gave, credibility helped me buy into the aspiration that this was going to be a wonderful experience and a wonderful outcome. So credibility opens the door sometimes, but it's not what your brand is. Another brand imperative that we need to understand is that you can't have a brand that contributes to the aspirational perceptions of your clients without promoting it. Your brand is not self-evident. It's 2017. Okay, we are all in marketing now. We are all broadcasters. All the tools that we have at our fingertips, from social media to advertising to webinars and things like this, we're broadcasters. And how you broadcast and what you broadcast will affect your brand. So if you want a strong brand, you're going to have to embrace the fact that you're going to need to talk about it. Right? Another important thing is passion. Boy, I don't know. This is probably a very hard thing to grasp because I know you're all passionate about your business. But what I hear you saying, and as I look at your websites and I sit in on your sales meeting and I look at your marketing campaigns and I hear you talk to customers, what you're talking about is your commitment. And commitment is fine. Commitment is great. It's noble. Okay. But I'll see your commitment and I'm going to raise you a passionate manifesto. Okay. Your success in branding and creating power and brand has more to do with passion than commitment. Commitment in the worst scenario is merely lip service. Passion is action. If you're passionate about something, if you truly are passionate, it's going to manifest itself in some ways. Clients are going to see this. Prospects are going to see this. And working with organizations who are trying to improve their sales, one of the things I talk about all the time is how to override the bow tie effect. And the bow tie effect, of course, is when I have a salesman managing the relationship with a client, and I basically have a one-to-one conversation between supplier and buyer. What we want to overcome is that roadblock, that gatekeeper mentality of the bow tie, and turn it around and create a diamond. And in a diamond effect, we have many people talking to many people. Okay? That's where passion comes out. That's where customers see what you're really passionate about as an organization. They get past the lip service, which is so common sometimes in salespeople. We say the words, but we can't exemplify the passion that's manifesting itself throughout your organization. Passion sells. And we're going to do a little bit of passion. We're going to talk a little bit more about passion here in just a minute. So now that I've put brand up in this cloud of really hard to grasp concepts, okay, I'm going to turn around and ask you to do something with it. We need to express the brand. Okay? When people want what you stand for, price is no object. Think back to that 2x2 chart I put up earlier. That upper right-hand corner is a manifestation of passion, which is your commitment to the customer and a commitment to your brand. Those things together are highly, highly attractive. And the people who are attracted to that tend to be much more price agnostic. Everybody has their limit. But the ideal customer in that upper right-hand corner is going to say, here's what we want to do. What's it going to cost? So I can write you a check. Okay, that's the difference. All right. So a little bit of a recap. Strong brands stand for something. We have to figure out what it is that you stand for. Having a well-known name is not the same as having a strong brand. Okay? Brands have to stand for something. Brands also have to be very clear about who their customers are. Part of what makes your brand strong is who you're not talking to. And we don't ignore market segments that we're not interested in. We just politely disregard them. Okay? We can acknowledge them. We can say hello and thank you. We can use our good manners. But we're going to focus on the ideal customer. And that reinforces your brand. Strong brands have another quality in that they don't share the marketplace. They stake out their spot. You'll often hear me talk about, in my manifestos, about just ignore the competition. Why are you talking about the competition? Why do you care what anybody else is doing? Focus on what you're doing. Focus on your customer. Okay? What your competition might or might not do is irrelevant. It's a distraction. Stay away from it. Strong brands don't need to talk about competition. They only talk about their customers. And they stake out, they draw a line in the sand and say, here's where we are in the marketplace, and they defy anybody to knock them off. They stake out their spot. The easiest example, the most accessible example for most of us is Apple computers. right? Right now, one of the largest, most successful corporations in history. We know who Apple customers are. We know what their brand stands for. It's always stand for elegant usage. You know, the way you open up a package, when you get that new computer or that iPad or that phone, the process of opening that package and the experience you have, okay, the ease of usability has always been important. And that's what Steve Jobs was all about. It was all about the customer experience, not just in the marketing, but in the actual usage of the product. They've staked out their marketplace and they politely ignored the people who had different usability imperatives, which effectively became, well, Windows users. So they didn't have to worry about that. They only said, no, we know that there's value for people in the Windows environment or in other environments, and fine, go use that. What we care about are the people who need the experience that we're offering. And they're very consistent, and they stuck with us. Okay? So manifestos. The journey to having a strong brand starts with manifestos. You have to believe in something. You have to be for something that benefits your customers. Manifestos are never against something, they're always for. And you're going to write some manifestos. That's going to be part of your homework, is write short, pithy manifestos without trying to explain what the manifesto means. Okay? Write the manifesto and think about how it manifests in your work, in what you do. You do things a certain way because you passionately believe something. Now, there is the outside chance that you don't passionately believe things, or the things you passionately believe in are all against something and not for something. All right, well, that's a different discussion. That's actually a different webinar, because that's something we need to work on. And I do run into organizations, you know, who have been my clients over the years who start off passionately being against a lot of things, and it holds them back. We have to figure out what they're for, because I can't market against things. I can only market for something. I can't get people to engage me. I can't promote my credibility by being against something. I've got to be for something. So manifestos are actually phrases. They're actually things that you can say out loud and probably should say out loud. And I'll give you some examples, and these are my examples in my business, okay? Because you've heard me say these things. I say things like sell outcomes, not transactions. I also say sell the end result, not the plan, which means the same thing. This is a manifesto. This is a line in the sand that I'm drawing. Okay? Transactional selling is dead. That's the old world. We're past that. It's never going to come back again. There's no place for it for my customers. There's no place for it for my clients. I am for selling outcomes. That's the future. I'm not going back. I'm passionate about this. I can tell this story, and I can give you examples of how folks have succeeded or increased their success by making this transition. Right? It's easier to believe someone and listen to them and apply their credibility to what they're saying when they're passionate. I say things like create capacity continuously. I say it different ways, but if I'm talking to operations, your number one job is to create more capacity. That's what operations does. It's the logical application of resources to the task at hand. The most important thing a person can do in operations is create more capacity. It's efficiency. It's better use of resources. I say don't let perfect get in the way of good. Very passionate about that. If you're at 80%, go. Go. Don't wait. You're never going to get to perfect. You hear me talk about this in a lot of different ways. Anyone can be competent, be credible. Credibility is very important. As to the last question. Okay. In our industry, in the AV industry, for many of you, your credibility is paramount. but you focus too much on merely being competent. You focus too much on the process or your project management system, how you do things. Okay? Focus on what those things do for your customer, and you're going to have a better story. And this last one comes up every once in a while, but I live it. You don't get extra points in business for doing it the hard way. So these are manifestos. These are things that I passionately believe, and I weave that into my work all the time. You can go to just about any blog post I do, and you're going to find some manifestation of these examples. And my regular clients probably hear them far more than they want to. But I believe in them, they're important, and they do make a difference. You have the same thing. Figure out what your manifestos are about the business, what you're for. That's beyond the product or service that you're trying to sell. The next thing you can do to manifest your brand is to add imagery to it. Words are great. I'm good at words. I have lots of words. I have the best words. Okay? But we also need the imagery, because not all of us are word people. Not all of us process information the same way. So part of marketing is to be able to communicate in multiple ways. Right? Here's a simple image. Trust me, this took me 5 minutes to put together. Okay, this is not art. This is not going to show up in my marketing. My marketing people will kill me when they find out that I use this. But create an image. Your needs to remarkable results. It's a journey to excellence. We're going over the mountain. Okay? But I don't think you have to go over the mountain. I think what you can do is go through it. So I'm taking my manifesto about remarkable results and focusing on outcomes, and I'm adding an image to it to say there's a shorter way to get there. We can skip the journey and go straight to the end result. That's imagery. So find a way to express what you do in images. Another brand manifesto is intellectual property. You need evidence of your passion, and intellectual property is a great way for us to do that. So it's going to reinforce your brand. It's going to bring life to your manifestos. There's going to be blog posts. It can be videos. There's all sorts of things that you can do. You can create webinars, positions. You can do presentations. You can do skits. Whatever you do, you own. It's your intellectual property. You can design systems. You can create products and trademarks. All of these things bring life to your manifesto. If your intellectual property is industry oriented, then it can bring value to the industry. And when it comes to making intellectual property, we're not focused solely on customers. Oh, my customers won't read that. That's not the point. Will your prospects read it? Will influencers read it? Will advocates read it? I've got a story back from my Alford Media days, back in probably the mid-90s, because magazines were still around back then. And we felt the need, we were being very successful, but we felt the need to advertise, and we weren't really sure why. We just wanted to celebrate the progress we'd made and the success we had. So we bought some ads in Reynolds Staging Systems magazine, which is completely counterintuitive because our customers didn't read it. It was only read by our competition. But we advertised it in anyway. It made us feel good, and they were great ads, and I think they were called Being Burgundy. And they were images of dapper, much younger people than they are now, wearing the Alford Burgundy shirt, looking pretty snazzy, and talking about the qualities, basically the Alford manifestos about what was important for that brand. It had a surprisingly wonderful effect, because what it did was it told the influencers, they gave the influencers words and perceptions about the brand that they expressed when in conversation. In particular in the freelance community, because Alford was very good at working with freelancers and treating freelancers and freelancers became the best marketing you could ever hope for, because they were the evangelists. They were working with all sorts of clients for all sorts of our competition and sharing great stories. They became the advocates, and they created more advocates. And that ad was just one of many things that the organization did to promote its brand. That ad's intellectual property. the concept of being burgundy is intellectual property, and the ideas behind it were manifestos. All right? Teach, train, explain, share. Okay, be unselfishly helpful but branded. Okay, I brand everything that I do, but I give away a ton of intellectual property. Okay, you can do the same thing, but understand who your target audience is, because that's who you want to teach, train, and explain to. All right. Brand reinforcement, speaking of multipliers, brand statements. Now, many of us settle for our company name and a brand statement. And that's just part of the formula. So it's a way to reinforce the brand, but the passion still has to be behind it. And I've got 3 examples up here that I wanted to share, and these are all folks that I've worked with over the years, and I take no credit for their brand statements. I'm simply sharing them because I think they're as proud of these brand statements as I am for them. CEFCO has a brand statement, love what you see and hear. It explains what they're passionate about. Now, they have many manifestos behind this. EventTech, who we will talk about, actually, we're going to speak with EventTech tomorrow on the Business Survival Call for Sales and talk about their experience in developing a new website and the branding, and they have a brand statement called Just Press Play. And it manifests itself on its website. And it's just wonderful to watch how it all came together. So I hope you'll join me for that session as well. The folks at DWP, their website says we make the impossible possible, and they back it up. So brand statements are entry-level manifestos. They get people's attention, they position you in a certain way, and we'll talk about how to develop a brand statement in just a minute. And then for every manifesto, you need a story. For every manifesto that I have, I could probably give you 10 stories about that give meaning to the manifesto. Here's what happens when we pay attention to this. When we're for this, this is the outcome. Here's how it works. You've got brand stories that will help you determine what your manifestos are. So you'll always have a brand story for every manifesto. Some more brand multipliers, because also we need to be promoting our brand. I'll start with the obvious one. I was in a session not too long ago with a major manufacturer who's staking a strong brand, okay, customer focused, moving into a new marketplace, a new type of customer. So they're very strongly moving into that space by staking out territory. They're doing the Apple thing, saying we know who our customers are, we're staking a claim for them here, and we're going to ignore what the competition does. Okay. One of the tools that they're going to have to use is an opt-in campaign, because they're going into a marketplace where they really have no contacts at all. They're new to it, but they have a product that's going to work very well for this new audience. Right? So they're going to create an opt-in campaign that talks about the challenges. They're going to buy a few mailing lists. They're going to get some organizations to do some mailings for them, where they talk about the topic. They talk about the issues that their new product solves and that their brand solves. Right? They're going to find people who are interested in that topic and have a conversation with them, drive them eventually back to the brand site. So they're going to build a mailing list by talking about the issues that are important to those customers. It's completely customer focused. They're not even going to talk about product. It's going to be a thing of beauty. It's going to be extremely successful. You can do this to promote events. You can do this to promote content or intellectual property. Opt-in campaigns are how you build mailing lists. Remember what I said earlier, we're all in the marketing business now. Yep. We have to do things like this. If you find things like email marketing distasteful, then you better not be the one who does it, because there's probably not a thing you do or buy that is not creating greater success through electronic marketing. Now, you can do it poorly, you can be annoying. There's a lot of ways to not do it well. Most of them revolve around focusing on the product. When you focus on the customer, they're much better received. Another way to multiply your brand is through sponsoring. In our industry, we have an opportunity. We're very often asked to sponsor things, particularly the folks in the rental production world. They're always being asked to donate equipment, do something for free in exchange for a sponsorship, a seat at the table, you know, some dinner tickets, that sort of thing. If you're going to be an effective brander, you're going to be very selective about how you sponsor. And you're going to sponsor complementary causes. In other words, things that have a tie-in to what you do. Remember, your manifesto says you're for something. What's the benefit of being for something? Is that it helps something. So if you can find causes to sponsor that might perceptively be helped by what you do, that would be awesome. Help them get the message out. However, don't be the AV sponsor. That's the kiss of death. AV is very unimportant to most people. It's only important to AV people, right? Don't be the AV sponsor. Be a sponsoring brand. AV sponsors look like, you know, third-level suppliers. They go, oh, they donated something. They're not given the credence that a sponsoring brand gives. I'm not saying that you don't donate some equipment, you don't do some work, you don't deliver some time as well as treasure to help out an organization. But make sure you're represented as a brand and not as a product. You'll get much better mileage out of your effort. It will deliver the results that you actually intended, which is being a brand multiplier. Brand missteps. All right, we make some mistakes on branding. The first mistake we all make is assuming we actually have a brand. Okay, if your brand is not evident to an outsider, you don't have one. It's very important to get outsiders to take a look at your position. Okay, having a brand name, having a brand statement, having imagery, having intellectual property need third-party validation in order to have any effect. Okay, sometimes we're just talking to ourselves inside of a bubble. You know, we're selling ourselves on who we want to be. Many branding efforts are actually focused internally, oddly enough. We're trying to convince our employees of what we stand for. Okay? I find that this delivers a mixed message. If we can focus on the customer and brand to the customers, I find that employees tend to pick up on it much more quickly. So if your brand is not evident to an outsider, you don't have one. Okay? Recognized brands. There's all sorts of recognized brands that don't have any value. All right. Anybody heard of Radio Shack? Yeah. There's a brand that has zero value. It has so little value that it's not even in business anymore. So being recognized isn't necessarily brand value. Okay? The question that I ask, and I'm often the outsider helping assess brands, is does your perceived brand have a positive effect on outsiders? Do customers, vendors, partners, colleagues, you know, the folks that you're sponsoring, do they see your brand in a positive way? Okay? They don't have to be buyers to matter. Their opinions matter because these are followers. Followers are valuable. If you don't think followers are valuable, go look at Donald Trump. Followers are valuable. Okay? Now, brand value. A bad opinion is a bad brand. There's not much you can do about it. Okay? No opinion means you have no brand. A high opinion means you might have a good brand. Okay? However, if you can live up to a high opinion, you're going to have a great brand. And that's what we're looking for. That's the most valuable thing. Living up to the high opinions of others to outsiders means you have a great brand. This is what allows certain brands to be very successful over long periods of time. This is what allows brands to make mistakes. Going back to the Apple example, they've made some horrendous mistakes. Okay? But people have a high opinion of them, and they tend to live up to that high opinion. When they address a mistake, okay, they tend to address it completely. You may have a differing opinion depending on what crisis you're going through with your laptop right now or your iPhone, but in general, their brand is built around how they respond to adversity. Another thing that we have to mistake we make is believing that we can steer brands. If you think you're steering a brand, make sure your customers are tagging along. Very often we try and steer the brand without considering the effect. I worked with Radio Shack, and they're a great example because they did so many things wrong. It's just a bounty of mistakes. I worked with Radio Shack. I started doing shows with them in 1984, all the way up until the time that I got out of the show side of the business in 2006. I was involved in Radio Shack projects. But Radio Shack, I was a direct supplier to Radio Shack in my first company. So I got to watch them do a lot of things. And I started with them when they were so product focused. Everything was about their catalog, and their sales meetings, when they went around the country and brought in all the store managers, and I got 1,500 people in the audience, and the entire presentation was simply going through the catalog one product at a time. They could do 450 products because we had 480 slides on a 6-projector slideshow. That was our limitation about how many products. And that just said they just put more products on a slide at a time. Okay, completely product focused, not a lick of concern about the customers. And then over the years, they tried to, address the fact that people weren't going there to buy diodes or transistors or TV tubes. As a child, as a kid, I learned how to repair the TVs at home because my dad built televisions, and I was going to Radio Shack and using the tube tester and buying replacement tubes. That's what Radio Shack was. It was a supply store for people who worked on radios and then later televisions. They made some retooling mistakes. Okay, they didn't follow their customers. They were trying to find products to sell, and they ended up selling, cell phone service and refrigerators and dishwashers and things that you would, go look at a piece of paper in the store and then order it and have it shipped to your home. Now, that all makes sense now because we buy online, but this is what they were trying to do in the late 90s and the early 2000s. All right. JCPenney had another problem, and that they deviated from their customer expectations. The JCPenney brand had lost most of its value, very much like Sears and some other retail brands. They didn't keep up with the times. And JCPenney was known as a discounter, and their customers wanted discounts. They rebranded and said, we're no longer a discounter. We're just going to offer great pricing every day. Well, guess what? People who shop based on sales don't believe you when you say you're going to have great pricing every day. And they basically killed the brand, what was left of it at any rate. So they did inconsistent messaging. They set up their stores that ran counter to the message that they were delivering. It was a disaster. It's well documented. It's every marketing class in college is going to talk about JCPenney because this is recent memory. So look at your customers. Don't change your brand direction without putting the customers first. They'll tell you where your brand needs to go. Sub-brand, you know what? Before I leave here, I just want to talk, I told you I'd talk a little bit about my mistakes. My company, when I started this business, it was, the Stimson Group. And after I incorporated, it became Stimson Group LLC. Most of you are here because you subscribe to a magazine, or an e-magazine called AV-Matters. All right, that's a sub-brand. So I have a brand that ran in conflict of my consulting brand. And the other thing my consulting brand did was it put the name of the company first instead of me. So my branding mistakes were two. One, having two different brands, which I've learned to overcome in a different way. But two, branding the company instead of branding myself. I'm an independent consultant. So a couple of years ago, we changed the branding and now we brand Tom Stimson. There's still a company name behind there, but it's Big Tom Stimson, Little Stimson Group. So there's my branding mistake. Okay? I didn't brand what my customers told me was important to them. They couldn't care less about Stimson Group, the company, but they do have some opinions about me, oddly enough. All right, brand conflicts. Conversation I have a lot with my clients. So they have all these sub brands for what are effectively just lines of business. Okay, so the lead brand is the one the customer enters. So if the customer comes into you via your company brand, your lines of business don't necessarily need to have sub brands. Okay. Sometimes we rename things. It's like very typical for the live events world. You know, most of us came from the rental background. We were rental companies, and then we started doing events, so we became event companies, and then we started calling ourselves production companies, and then clients asked us to do creative, and creative scared us because it's so different from what we've been doing, which is selling products, that we created another brand so that we wouldn't confuse or alienate our core customers. Let me tell you, confusion is much harder to solve than surprise, and creating sub-brands and micro-brands often introduces confusion. I'd rather surprise a client and say, guess what? You may not know this, but we also do this. And that's a shorter conversation. It's much easier to bring somebody around than solve the confusion, the long-term confusion that sub-branding creates. So micro-brands, that brand within the brand, okay, that I'm talking about, it's a sub-market for major brands under the same name. Here's the deal. A micro brand might not help your macro brand might not help your micro brands, but micro brands should help the macro. So there is a time and a place to create a micro brand, but it's got to reinforce the bigger brand. Let me think of some examples here in our industry. And probably the easiest one is, because this is the biggest company in the industry, is Freeman. You know, Freeman is the brand. There are micro brands within the Freeman organization that reinforce the Freeman brand. Ultimately, you know, the trajectory is that it will be one brand, Freeman. And if those of you can remember back 10 years, there was no Freeman brand. There was Freeman Decorating, there was Freeman Exposition, there was Freeman this, Freeman that, and then lots of sub-brands that had nothing, didn't even have the word Freeman in them. So they rebranded and solved a lot of that. And now they allow the micro brands to flourish as long as they reinforce the macro brand. So don't brand when all you really need to do is name a product. Name a product, name a service, apply a trademark, and you'll be fine. In my business, and I'm really excited because I have 6 trademarks in the final stage. I've already gotten 2 of the registrations, and I'll be able to change some of my service marks to the Circle R registered trademark. Okay, these are products, most of them. You know, AV Matters is a product within my brand. Intentional Success is a product within my brand. I didn't change the name of my company to Intentional Success. I created a product called Intentional Success and built some things around it. So that's a micro brand. Heritage brand. Here's a great company, and I know they're actually on the call here today. You know, Bartha's been around for years. They've been around. The Bartha name actually, I think, started about it was in the 40s, and they were Bartha Visual Education Service, and that was a rebranding of a company that existed before that for probably 40 years. And as they evolved, they became Bartha Visual, and today they're just called Bartha. That's the umbrella brand. You know, that's the top brand. And within that, they have the micro brands of events, staging, and production. Okay, those all reinforce the master brand. So we see this in our industry all the time. And you can evolve to something like this. Generally, and oddly enough, the name's just going to get shorter. There's a lot of one-name companies out there now that used to have a long, drawn-out AV name, and now they have a short one-word name that they're identified with. So let's talk about how you uncover your brand, because I realize you don't understand. Most of us say, I don't know what my brand stands for. I've talked about this in other webinars, but here's a good application for it, the brand trifecta. Okay, the brand trifecta I'm looking for is 3 words out of many, and if you do a brainstorming session, you're going to build a lot of different words out there. I'm looking for words that will improve the client's condition, things that benefit, customer-focused words. And we go through all of these words and we come up with the 3 that seem to be the most powerful. And here's some examples of 3 different companies that I've talked about in the past. Dependability, safety, planning. Another company, fun, innovative, and abundant. The first one is an execution company. The second one is a creative company. The third one is an engineering company. Expert, documented, and secure. Okay, their customers, these words mean a lot to them. That's the brand trifecta. Now, what do we do with this? We use this to develop the brand promise. And remember the brand promises that I shared earlier with those 3 companies. Okay, those are brand promises. You may never see as an outsider the brand trifecta, but you will see the brand promise. So we convert these into a statement that exemplifies the value of those 3 words. It can be a little bit of a catchphrase, but hopefully it's a value proposition. It says you're for something. It's the conversation starter. You know, we talk about elevator speeches, and you know, it's a very common exercise in workshops to say, hey, you know, John, give me your elevator speech. And then you look at your watch 5 minutes later, you're still talking. Okay? Your best elevator speech is something that you can say in under a breath. And a brand promise is a great place to start. And the best ones elicit a response from the listener. And even if it's only, what does that mean? It means that you get to talk more. And that's what we're looking for. So here's some examples of brand promises. So for the dependability, safety, and planning folks, the brand promises, we understand the implications of what we do. Now, I happen to know that this company has found a better brand promise for them than this. This is the one we built for them. And that's great. Their new one is shorter. It's actually more effective. Fun, innovative, and abundant. The brand promise is ideas you can't forget. They're a creative company. They say, well, give me an example. Ideas you can't forget. Wow, that's okay. Give me an example. Now you got a chance to tell a story. Now, this is what we want to do. Our brand has got to reinforce these things. And I've already said manifestos and stories go together. So you can develop a manifesto and a story for each outcome in the brand trifecta. That would be an approach. Okay. Or you can develop the stories or relate the stories, create the manifestos that leads to the brand trifecta. Or you may have a brand trifecta and you're going to find the manifestos that fit. There's lots of different ways to get there. Your manifestos and your stories have to answer the question, how do you make customers successful? There's a recurring theme here, isn't it, about customers? How do you make customers successful? Let's tell a story. All right. So brand initiatives. Okay. Lots of little steps in the right direction. You cannot wake up tomorrow and decide that you're going to have a stronger brand, write a brand trifecta, do some more marketing. Okay. It's a long haul. This is a journey. Okay. This is many things done consistently in the right direction for a long time. You more than anything have to live up to the brand. What kills brands is not living up to it. What killed Radio Shack is they quit being Radio Shack. They even made a mistake of changing the name to The Shack, which meant nothing. Then they had to change it back because they found out the Shack meant absolutely nothing. People were going there trying to buy hamburgers. Okay, get your message out. Okay, our brand is not self-evident. It will not circulate itself. And none of this happens overnight. But you can destroy a brand almost instantaneously. Go back to my example there on The Shack. Great way to kill a brand. And then once you've done this, okay, once you've made these decisions, you want to move something in the right direction. And so how do you move something in the right direction when there's 100 things that you need to do, or 20 or 10? Okay. And here's an exercise that we use. This was an exercise about competitive advantages or opportunities. And so we ask the company, and you can use this for branding to say, okay, what are the advantages that you have or expect to have as you move into this new marketplace? Okay. And then the question is, for each of these, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you think you are now, and where do you want to be at the next juncture? It could be 3 months from now, it could be a year from now, it could be 2 years from now. I suggest shorter. Say, okay, what are we going to do then to help move our pricing advantage from a 5 out of a 10 to a 7 out of 10 over the period described? What are maybe 2 or 3 things that we need to do, that we need to put continual effort on, that's going to help get us there? Okay. So this is the exercise. Once we get out of the conceptualization of brand, here's an exercise we would use to help move brand forward. Thank goodness this is recorded and you can download the handout as well, right? So I'm going to pause here and see if you guys have any questions that are pent up before I move on to some final notes. And I've got a diagnostic thing that I want to talk about, the thing at the very end, tie back into the chart we had at the beginning. So don't go away. I'm not seeing, well, I see one question coming up here asking about, does brand, okay, there's an owner on the call here. Does brand have value when you're selling an organization? All right, sometimes it does, honestly. Sometimes it does. A brand name, brand presence, brand recognition can have marketable value. However, it doesn't show up on the balance sheet. It may increase the multiplier that you might get for your organization. It may increase the strategic value to the buyer, which increases buyer perception. There are more important values to having a good brand and reinforcing your brand than creating intrinsic value at divestiture. So that while it's a consideration in terms of an exit strategy, it's far from the most important consideration in developing brand. But thank you for that question. So intentional success. Oh, I slipped the registration mark in on this one. All right, well, you know, it's been approved. I just don't have the certificate in my hand yet, so I'm safe. There's a lot of things that we have to do, and the web series has always revolved around these things, and it's a continuous circle. We've got to identify our customer segments, offer a clear value proposition, be findable, be credible. We got to capitalize on our brand. We're talking about brand today. We have to be confident in our pricing and our margins. We sell beyond capacity, which means we have to have a process for process change, which allows us to get bigger. Back to customer segments. And if we keep doing all of these things and keep pushing these challenges up the hill, then we're going to increase our growth and profit, which is what it's all about. So thanks for listening to that. Go to trstimson.com, subscribe to Intentional Success if you have not yet. That's my weekly newsletter. And Business Survival Call, I mentioned that earlier. We have 2 calls tomorrow. It's not too late to register and make that purchase. And so you can join those calls and also get all the archives. We've had a great year of these calls, which is all about Q&A. This is all questions that you sent in, open discussion, a lot more frank, very lively and interesting calls. And once again, I'll cite our sponsors. Leave that up there for a second. I had a question here that says, how do you convince your employees to buy into the brand you create? The same way you convince customers, and that is you don't convince them. Okay? You have to be attractive. Okay? You lure them in. They have to believe in what you're selling. So your manifestos, the things that you stand for, if that's what your employees believe in and they see you manifesting that in your work and in your deeds and actions, okay, then they will follow. So say what you do what you say. That's how you get employees to buy in. Great question. And another question here, I want to answer this even though we're about out of time. As a project manager who doesn't work in sales or marketing, how do I best reinforce my employer's brand? Awesome. Figure out what the manifestos are. Act on them and believe in them. Okay. Look at when you deal with, in project management, mostly what we do is solve problems, solve them in line with the manifestos, solve them in line with the things that we passionately believe in, err on the side of the brand rather than the expediency and sometimes even cost. Okay, great. So here's your homework. First of all, I need you to brainstorm 7 manifestos. Why 7? Because 5's not enough and 12 is too many. Okay? And they're not all going to be good. So get 7 of them out there. These are statements that reflect your passion about what you do. Create at least one image that illustrates what you do. Remember my mountain pick and drilling through the mountain. You have a manifesto that you can put in customer terms in terms of an image. And then plan at least 3 ways you're going to promote or share this message over the next quarter. What are some things that you can do to push this boulder up the hill and promote your brand? Great conversation. It's a good time. If you have more questions about that, don't hesitate to email me. All right. Now, quick diagnostic before we wrap up. Remember our chart here? We got our 4 quadrants for weak and strong brand, customer focused, product focused. You write a lot of proposals, talk about price, and close too little, then we know you're in the bottom left-hand corner. You have a weak brand. You're too product focused. You're a proposal mill. Okay. If the customer says you did a great job and puts the next project out to bid, we know you have a weak brand, but you're customer focused. You're overcoming indifference. If the customer says you're great but has issues with communication, you might have a strong brand, but you're too product focused. The customer's going to expect better. We have to address the customer experience. And when the customer asks for services that you don't offer, that means the customer wants more. Pat yourself on the back and meet their expectations. That's how you grow. That's how you're more successful. So whatever quadrant you find in, there's a strategy that you can adapt that will help you get to the next place. If you're in the bottom left-hand corner, if you have a weak brand and you're product focused, when I come into your organization, I'm working on management. Management is the problem. If I find you have a weak brand and you're customer focused, I'm going to work on sales and marketing. That's what we're going to improve. That's how we're going to build up our brand and get us in the top right-hand quadrant. If you're product focused, but you have a strong brand, I'm going to be working with operations. Okay, we've got to change the customer experience that will move us into a customer focused promise. We have to be passionate about all things customer instead of about how we do things. The solution is in operations. And if I already have a strong brand and I'm customer focused and I want to improve on these things, that's when I'm going to work on strategy. Strategy will not get you from the bottom left-hand corner to the top right-hand corner. All right. So thank you very much for this. I ran a little bit over, but I think it was worthwhile. Thank you for the questions, folks. If you have more questions, feel free to email me. This will be archived on avmatters.com, also on trstimson.com, and I hope you'll share that with your friends. And we'll see you on the next webinar. Have a good one.